This is a reaction to a podcast called Redefining Energy. Two guys out of Europe, highly recommended, shout out to them, links in the show notes. This episode was about wind, and they said a couple of things in this episode that I want to react to and add my thoughts because, let me say what they said and then why I think this is important to mention here at the Not Even On podcast. So what they basically said is that the wind industry is kind of caught in no man's land, where on the one hand there's corruption. Let's say in the coal industry, coal is being subsidized just because of corruption. Then there is the problem of distance with wind. So you have wind in Oklahoma, but you need the electricity in New York, so you can't get the wind from Oklahoma to New York. And they're also talking about the IRA, which was the Inflation Reduction Act that passed under the Biden administration, that basically promised lots of offshore wind, and that didn't pan out. So my conclusion here, the reason I want to say a few things is to the people from the podcast. I think one is called Gerard, the other Laurent, I believe. Listen, guys. We're all for renewable energy. I live in Silicon Valley. I invest in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. We're all for disruption. We want to be independent of oil and gas. The problem that the renewable industry has, and definitely had and still has, is that they sort of, that they allied with the woke movement. You see, whether what your gender is and whether your company has enough women on the board, unfortunately, doesn't impact any kind of energy independence, economics, or any of those things that actually drive real deployment. So that would be just my main comment here, because you have a lot of disappointment here in the US. And for example, the Trump administration is openly against renewables. But I think I think the reason the Trump administration is against renewables is not because they don't want to be, they have a problem with being energy independent, or they somehow resent wind turbines or solar. I think they couldn't care less. If the economics work, they'd be happy to invest in those technologies. And nobody is stopping onshore wind in Texas and places like that. So the problem is that it was commingled with the woke movement. So, accepting, gender conversations, women in men and women's sports, the whole racial issues and DEI and the, hollowing out of our institutions, whether it's government, whether it's in universities, all of these things were commingled with the renewable energy movement. And that's really unfortunate because they have nothing to do with each other. And I think that's also the path forward. If you want to have a sustainable investment policy on the federal level and the state level, you need to unentangle these things. And I think the best example is actually Texas. Texas is a red state. There isn't much wokeism there. And wind is still working because of the economics. So if you untangle this, you can basically have, eat the pie and I don't know what the saying is, but you can have it both ways. What you can't have is this commingling of policies. And I think this is one of the major problems of the woke movement and this really bad revolution that we had in the last maybe 10 years or so, started with Obama, and then definitely got accelerated with COVID and under Biden, which is that these people, they on the one hand spend trillions of dollars of taxpayer money on crony gifts under the guise of really good ideas, civil rights and DEI. Those are good ideas, BLM, whatever it is, whatever the acronym. Those are good ideas, but they were really hijacked in a bad way. And I think I want to focus on the renewable energy space here. The renewable energy space has, I think, suffered the most because, again, it's been equated like from the perspective of a Trump voter or somebody who votes for Trump. It's, well, if you want solar, then you want man and women's sports, right? That's unfortunately the way people think. And that's, of course, totally wrong. It shouldn't be like that. And that's on the left. That's on, not even the left, forget the left. It's on the people who really genuinely want to push energy transition. The best example, of course, is Elon Musk and Tesla. There is no company in the world that does more for a sustainable transition of energy than Tesla. It's actually the mission of the company. The mission has changed a little bit to sustainable abundance, but there's still, within that context, there is the idea that we have sustainable energy. Without energy, nothing works. We know that. I mean, you don't need to be a student of economic history to understand this. But let me just elaborate. You cannot have a civilization, a prosperous civilization that lifts people out of poverty, that has some resemblance of democracy, that is geared towards a fairer, better solution for future generations. Particularly, you cannot have a society that continuously improves its conditions for the next generations, which in my opinion is the most important aspect of any society. A society that is not interested in improving the environment for its own future generation, its own, very clear. Not some foreign country's future, but our own future. Any kind of policy like that is misguided in the first place. So if you want to improve your kids' future, if you want to give them a better chance to do whatever they want to do, if you want to increase their opportunity set, or to use David Deutsch's definition of wealth, all the possible transformations a society can do, that requires energy. So energy is absolutely pivotal. Nobody is arguing against that. I think, again, we can have different mixes of energy. We need to do a lot of research also in nuclear. We can maybe do fusion. I'm not a big fan of that, but not because I have a problem with fusion or anything like that. I'm just, this is just a tangent, but I think from a scientific perspective, it's not a good idea to invest in very large 0-1 projects, which means projects that take decades and then maybe they work or maybe they don't work. That's typically not a good idea. I think it's a much better idea to have a sort of a very broad, diverse set of research projects, and then let those little projects that have a chance to succeed in the lab, and then maybe in prototypes, and then maybe in small economic environments, let those projects grow. Now, having said that, I think, again, maybe some fundamental research on the fusion side is useful. It's kind of like the same question, like, should we go to Mars? My answer is yes, we should have these big ambitions, because there's always very good spillover of technologies. What we should not have, and this is another tangent which is related, we should not have them government funded. That's the key idea. If Elon Musk wants to spend billions and billions of dollars of his own profits that he generates with SpaceX and push Mars exploration, that he should do this, and actually that's a great thing, and we should celebrate him as a hero for doing that. The same applies to other companies that have those types of ambitions. But what we shouldn't do is subsidize these types of things. Subsidies don't work, whether they are from the government or from rich billionaires or from I don't care who, World Trade Organization or World Health Organization or whatever. Whoever is subsidizing, it doesn't help. Subsidies don't work. What works is sustainable organic development of ideas and technologies. So back to the main topic. So again, I think the problem with the wind energy specifically, which has been discussed in this particular episode of the Redefining Energy podcast, the wind energy, in my opinion, is certainly competitive in many areas, but it has been suffering under too much government involvement and the commingling of wokeism with wind. For example, why is Alice Weidel, the head of the AfD in Germany, against wind? It's not because she has a problem with Germany being independent of wind. It's just that it is, for her, it's the same like having illegal immigration or discriminating against Germans in favor of foreigners and all those woke policies that are infesting Germany and France and England right now. I think the same with Trump, same with it shouldn't be that, Viktor Orban, who's a right-wing politician, also wants for some reason to, is against wind. I mean, why should he be? Again, it's not a good idea to commingle this. So what the political movement did, this renewable movement, it aligned with the left and the liberals and those woke people, and that was a big mistake. And I think an unentanglement of these things is highly desirable, because we here at Orange Capital Partners, actually, we are investing in those technologies. We want them to win. We want, cables to be built from Oklahoma to the Northeast. We want solar, we want batteries. All of these things are in our favor. What we don't want is, that to be equated also with DEI or something like that. It's counterproductive at least, and at worst, it actually destroys the whole industry. Now, let me say a few things generally about government involvement, because people might say, look, you're talking, but without government subsidies, nothing, even Tesla wouldn't have, been able to survive without government subsidies. Look, the way I look at the government is the way I look at my own family at home, right? I have kids, I raise kids, I have a wife, I have a house, I organize myself, my family, they organize themselves around me, I organize myself around them. Like, there are things we do, like we influence our kids, we're not just sort of sitting there in the morning, laissez-faire, like whatever happens, right? We're not like that. And we don't go to, we're not pagan type, believers in a seer who tells us what the future will look like or anything like that. So we try to influence what we can, control what you can control. So as a government, let's say if Tesla needs a $500 million loan to bridge to finish a factory, then that's fine. Give them that $500 million loan. Make it contingent on repayment. Make sure that they get as independent as fast as they can. Make your companies independent of the government. It's like raising kids, right? You want to help your kids, but at some point you need to let them loose. And that's hard for parents. I know that's hard, and the kids might oppose and no. But it is the only way to have a successful family. It's independent kids to take care of their own lives, and the same applies to the economy. So there is a gray zone where you can have support for research, you can have support for projects. It's all fine, but of course we have gone way too far. We have 40 trillion in debt and counting. More than 1 time GDP. A lot of that money has been wasted on crony capitalism. Not everything has been wasted on energy policy, of course, but some of that, when you have that much of a deficit and that much of debt that we have right now, then you can bet that we also are, wasting a lot of money on useless science projects. So we need to disentangle the government from research, from universities. Here's another tangent. I believe universities should actually be in the business of teaching and not doing research. I know this is controversial. Some people might not like this idea. I don't think the universities should be mainly investing in research. That's not their job. Their job is to teach. And now, of course, there's a gray zone again. There's, some of the teaching at the highest level, at the graduate level, can only happen if you also push the boundaries of knowledge. So I'm not against expanding knowledge at the university level, but again, it can't be subsidized with government money and, by the way, cheap labor from Asia, which is another problem, a whole different podcast. I don't want to talk about this right now, but the fact that a graduate student in the US makes about a third of what somebody makes who works for a hedge fund is just an abomination. It's horrible, and that's because graduate students are being exploited. Cheap labor from China and somewhat from India and other Asian countries is being imported. It might be good for those types of people who take advantage of these, jobs because they can go back or bring their families. That's all fine. But what we need actually is much, much higher pay for universities. The universities should pay a full price for their grad students and pay the full price for their research, and then they will also pick the right project. So back to the main topic. Again, I think the intermingling of government and particularly woke ideology with renewable energy that's the problem with the renewable energy industry in general, not just in the US. Actually, what we're doing in the US now is the right thing that everybody else should be doing. We're untangling it. And then we'll see where the chips fall. And the chips will fall, I can bet already, the chips will fall there where the economics work, which is the best vector for success for any industry. The way we see the future, we think that renewables can play a role. They have to be sustainable, like in Texas. You can use them also for Bitcoin mining, for example, and things along those lines. We need batteries. I think Spain and Portugal recently have shown that if you have a large renewable network, you also need batteries in order to balance the voltage, frequencies, things like that. And we do see a lot of demand for batteries. So batteries, that's fine. I think the the economics for batteries are really good. And that's important because we need much, much more research in material science. We need much better batteries. We need batteries that eventually can be brought to Mars. and in other words, maybe 3D printed batteries or very light materials that can also store a lot of energy and be used for EVs and things like that, and airplanes. So we're just at the beginning here, and that's the good news, that we have a lot of demand for batteries to back up solar. I think solar itself can go much further with, let's say, organic photovoltaics, so we can have new chemistries, new polymers that maybe have much higher efficiencies. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruits there, and to some extent, the tariff policy of President Trump is helping here, because what we don't need is just cheap imports of Chinese solar panels. That's not going to bring us further. It's okay for some projects to be economic, and maybe in Texas, and again, maybe Bitcoin mining and things like that, and that's fine. I'm not against that. But I think what we need is much more research and development on the material science side to come up with much better technologies to make solar more competitive, because it is a great resource. So to summarize my comments about the Redefining Energy podcast, the episodes in the show notes about wind and the rants of the hosts and the frustrations, I share them. But I just want to say again, the problem is the intermingling with the woke movement. I think we need to unentangle ourselves from these extremists and just focus on what is at stake, which is energy independence. That's what it's all about. Independent of fossil fuels, independent of Saudi Arabia, independent of you name it, independent of X. You want to have as much control over your energy production as you can. If you can. If you're Denmark, you can bet on wind. If you're Spain, you can bet on solar. There's nothing wrong with that, but try to be independent, because that helps in any which way. And we've seen, unfortunately, in geopolitical contexts, how bad it is when you depend, whether it's the US depending on Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, or whether it's Germany depending on Russia. It just never works out well when you have dependence. So the main idea of renewables, and by the way, that's the main driver of China. That's why China is investing so much in renewables. It's not because they care about the environment. It's because of energy independence. And this should be the main slogan. We want to be energy independent. The Green Party has nothing, the German Green Party has nothing to do with renewables. This is just a pretext for them to push their crony capitalism that they're pushing down the throat of Germans. What we need is energy independence. Actually, it should come from the right. It should come from Alice Weidel. It should come from people like that, from Le Pen in France, and from Nigel Farage in England, because you want to have a strong country standing on its own legs, on its own footage, with its own energy independence. Now, not everything can be done independently, and some of it needs to be imported. That's fine. But again, renewable energy should be about energy independence. I like what the podcast host said. They said that wind is about cables and solar is about batteries. I agree with that. It's not everything. I think both of these technologies, particularly solar, have a lot more legs to go in terms of R&D. Batteries have a lot more legs to go in R&D. I don't know about wind. I'm not too familiar with the wind per se, but I think there's probably some innovations there too. But what we've made fundamentally, again, is a disentanglement of politics. I think the Inflation Reduction Act was a very, very bad idea for many reasons, particularly for this commingling of extreme woke ideology with renewables. I think, again, we need to unentangle that. I think that IRA should never be mentioned again by the renewables industry, because it was a disgrace to any capitalist, anybody who actually believes in sustainable economic development. Thank you.